If all minds are together, we can go to our public presentations. Ms. Kaiser, would you tell us who they are and the order?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we're dialing the first one. The first one will be Fernando Flores. And at your places, those of you who are here, you have the handout that he provided in advance. So you have some materials from some of our presenters. Others do not have any, so.
Yes.
Mr. Flores, this is Mary Kaiser. You're on the line with the Redistricting Task Force, and you have 3 minutes.
Right now?
Yes, right now.
Good evening, members of the Redistricting Task Force. Ms. Miller, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been watching the meeting, and I want to thank you all for doing such a great job. Now, I only have 3 minutes, so I need to run through this. And
Yes,
by this, so I'm online, right? So,
yes, you are, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, by this time, you should have a copy of the recommendations. And let me back off a little bit. I'm Fernando Flores. I reside at 2740 Hemp Hill, and I'm the representing here this afternoon the United Hispanic Council of Tarrant County. And let me just run through these real quickly. I'm not going to read everything that I put down, but you should have a copy, like I said. Number one, we recommend that the Fort Worth City Council create an independent redistricting commission to do Fort Worth City Council redistricting. And we have a good explanation there that I think you all should read. Number two, we recommend strict adherence to the Voting Rights Act when drawing city council maps, regardless of which method of redistricting is used. And I think that Ms. Miller brought up a good point a while ago, and when she was talking about communities of interest. Shouldn't communities of interest, and that is race and ethnicity, should be at the top of the hierarchy to consider. And that's if Fort Worth is serious about inclusion and diversity at the city council, which will be in the indication. So that's what we're interested in. We're minorities. There's a long history. I, for one, have been participating in city council redistricting for 3 previous census cycles. So I'm very much aware of what's been going on. And I'll have to say that it hasn't been fair, I don't think. It's all been about independent incumbent interest, and at times very ugly. So adhere to the Voting Rights Act and to the communities of interest, minority communities of interest, where it's possible to create opportunity districts for minorities. You should do it. You should recommend that to the council. Now I'm going to go to number 3, and again, we recommend that regardless of the redistricting method used, that the residents of incumbents not be protected to assure that no more than one ends up in the same district. This has been something that I have seen in other redistricting cycles.
Mr. Flores, your 3 minutes is up. It goes by really fast.
Okay, so now I don't have anything else to say, right?
Right.
Mr. Flores, we have your paperwork, and we'll all read it with much interest. Thank you.
And I will be sending some more to you prior to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser.
You're welcome. Our next speaker will be Pablo Calderon, and you have some information from him as well.
This is Pablo.
Mr. Calderon, this is Mary Kaiser. You're on the line with the Redistricting Task Force, and they're ready for
Okay.
your comments, and you have 3 minutes.
Should I turn down my speaker, or
Yes.
can I?
Yes, if you would.
Okay.
That way we won't get feedback.
Okay, I've turned it down, but I can still watch, and I'm next.
And yes,
Okay.
you're ready to go.
My name is Pablo Calderon, and I live in Kellyanne Grace District. Some amended thoughts from what I wrote down originally. And these thoughts are on the redistricting criteria adopted June 7th, 2011. 2 criteria read like an attorney advising a client on how to comply minimally with the letter of the law, not a full embrace of the spirit of the law. Criteria number 2, the districts should assure that voting rights of racial and language minorities to participate in the electoral process and to elect candidates of their choice are not diluted. Not diluted should be changed to strengthened. Criteria number 3, the proposed districts should assure that voting rights of racial and language minorities under the current single-member district plan are not adversely affected. Not adversely affected is the minimum. The key goal of having 10 districts is to strengthen minority representation. Possible criteria include that minority communities should not be cracked or fragmented into several districts, none or fewer of which are minority opportunity districts, and minority communities should not be packed or concentrated into a small number of districts, such that their votes are wasted where their preferred candidate will win by an overwhelming majority. Minority opportunity districts must have at least 50% minority voting age population. Criteria number 7 should be amended. And that has to do with areas inside and outside Loop 820. That's acceptable if communities of interest exist. A statistical analysis of past council election results will be needed to determine the degree of racially polarized voting. Looking at that lets you know whether, in fact, there are communities of interest inside and outside Loop 820. And finally, the criteria number 10, it's a conflict of interest permission pass, but we trust that a process will be set up that will be equitable and fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bruce Miller, and he is here. And let me get his PowerPoint up for you.
I want y'all to know that Mr. Miller and I are related.
Okay, Mr. Miller, I have your PowerPoint up. If you'll just let me know when to move the slides for you.
Okay, thank you. It's good to be here. And we just thought I would just go over some of the quantitative measures of for drawing boundaries, and to focus on the Voting Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, and compliance with it. So let's move to the next slide. We can see that there's a continuum of population concentrations that we could have. And if we want to get an opportunity district, we need to have over 50% of the minority population in the district. But we have to be careful not to go too high, that the district becomes packed, and then we lose the chance to get more than one district with minority representation. Now, we heard the city attorney discuss these 3 qualifications, namely, is a district compact, is it politically cohesive, and is there a majority black sufficient to defeat the minority? Now, compactness actually you can actually put a number on that. And so there are 4 or 5 different measures of compactness. And one very popular one is just to take the area of your district and divide it by the area of a circle that has the same perimeter. So if you look at these different shapes, a circle would just have a compactness score of 1, a square of about 0.75, but I think we would all agree that a shape like this would not be considered compact. And if you look at the compactness score, you can see that it's quite small, just a few. So that's a good measure of quantifying what we mean by compactness.
Mm-hmm.
So the criteria that the Voting Rights Act will insist on is that you must have a minimum number of minority opportunity districts. The proportion of minority voters would have to be 50% or greater than 50% to target an opportunity district, but less than 75 to 80% to prevent packing. And the compactness test range should be greater than 0.5. Things like the square and the circle and the rectangle look okay. Things that are very distorted just don't work. Ranges are better than hard targets. You can't put a fixed number on any one of these principles. They're guides. Well, given this information, the task force can participate in drawing council districts as an opportunity to test these criteria for soundness and practicality. Mr. Costa said you will have the software and you can try it and see how it works.
And,
So thank you for your attention.
thank you. Let's see, stop sharing that. And, Mr. Ellison is coming up, and I also have his PowerPoint to share. Nope, I thought I did. Hang on a minute.
While we're waiting, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for calling out my lessons learned charts on the citizens' participation. I appreciate your
It's good
giving
stuff.
it your attention.
Okay.
My name is Byerwick Ellison, and I'm with Citizens for Independent Redistricting, and I'm going to confine my comments to minority packing. Next chart, please. In the last redistricting cycle, a lot of high-tech stuff came together. You had inexpensive, powerful computing hardware. You had really sophisticated, robust mapping software that had come way, way down in price, and then big data that joined to make this the process of redistricting a practically engineering precise process. Now, having these high-tech tools in the hands of leaders kind of allowed them to weaponize the redistricting process at the state and federal level. But these same tools in the hands of citizens like us also give us the opportunity to look over their shoulder and see how they operate. And let me give you an example of this. Next chart shows, let's zoom out and look at Tarrant County and Dallas County. This chart shows the distribution of Hispanic voters in these two counties. Each little circle represents a voting precinct. The size of the circle is proportional to the population of that precinct, and the shading, the darkness of shading, represents how dense the district, that precinct is, at least in terms of Hispanic voting here. So you can see in Tarrant County, they're confined. The Hispanic voters are largely north of downtown up to the Loop and the West Seminary area. A much bigger swath of them in Dallas County. Next slide shows your black voters. And again, in Tarrant, they're concentrated southeast of Fort Worth and then largely south of Dallas. The next slide shows you where your white population, white non-Hispanic population is. And make note, actually, of where the white Hispanic population isn't. Next slide shows U.S. Congressional District 33. You can see how that district was drawn by the outline of these dots. So this is an example of how you can pack a district. This district represented by Mark Vesey is 85% minority. It is packed by any definition. Next slide, actually I should mention that this might have been sort of a self-inflicted wound, but the most highly packed districts in Texas, congressionally, are minority districts. They are 80%, 90%, even 92% or 91% or 82% minority. So now let me go to the last chart. All right, let's zoom down into
Actually, your
Fort Worth.
your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, I'm sorry. These are the citizen plans. I just want to call your attention. These were the last district. The last column does not represent one of the criteria that they used, but I included it because the staff called out one of these citizen plans as reducing the number of minority opportunity districts by basically self-packing. So there is a danger that you can self-pack in addition to leaders doing that. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello,
Kenneth Jones?
this is he.
Yes, this is Mary Kaiser. You are on the line with the Redistricting Task Force if you have your comments, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I would just like to simply say my brief comments is that I'm lining up with Fernando's group, Lauren, concerning the opportunity for an independent council to be involved in this process. And I wanted to know what considerations were given for an outside independent committee to come with this process.
So are you, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yes, I was asking the question, Fernando's group has made mention of an independent group of individuals, and I know these are individuals that were picked by the city councilmen as their representatives, and I was wondering, was there any consideration for an independent council coming together outside of that for the committee to come together in this process? Was there ever that consideration?
Sir, we're not, we generally don't answer questions. We want to hear your presentation of what your concerns are that you wanted to offer us. So we're not a Q&A session, but we just want to hear from you.
Well, then I can just simply say from what I've listened to tonight, I was very impressed with how Austin came together with their collaborative efforts with the community and the drawing of the lines. Are the lines from the committee of you all, have those lines in the map already been drawn?
No, sir. He's asking
So
questions.
you're
Yeah,
going to
I know.
That's what I'm asking, Lauren. I'm asking, have that been drawn? And what's the role, since you all have been picked by, I'm just asking, since you all have been picked by city council persons, where does the community's involvement with the different groups come in with you all? And I think what you have on your agenda is that I think it's in January is when we come, or I may be mistaken in that, before you all make the final presentation in March, where community involvement and community input other than just this, do you all come to the particular communities? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, we will come. We will come to the communities, and you'll have an opportunity to come and make a presentation to the task force so that we know what you are concerned about, and we want to hear it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
We appreciate your input.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Joaquin Gonzalez.
Hello?
Is this Joaquin Gonzalez?
Yes, this is he.
This is Mary Kaiser with the City of Fort Worth. You are on the line with the Redistricting Task Force, and you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Thank you, and thank you for listening to me. My name is Joaquin Gonzalez. I'm a staff attorney with the Voting Rights Program at the Texas Civil Rights Project, and I would like to urge the task force to formalize and really prioritize compliance with the Voting Rights Act. I believe I heard one of the members earlier talk about how this has been done in other redistricting criteria from other jurisdictions, and not only just putting it in as a criteria, but making compliance with the Constitution and the VRA a priority, and some of these other geographic considerations only insofar as they do not weaken compliance with the Constitution or the Voting Rights Act. And as you know, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is still in full force, even though Section 5 is not in effect right now. And Section 2 really requires an in-depth look at the practical situation. So I think that should be written into the criteria that that a true look at compliance with Section 2, a full analysis needs to be done. You can't just use these sort of arbitrary baselines like 50%, but it has to do with the totality of the circumstances and sort of the actual statistics on the ground, and also emphasize the process itself to put in place formal procedures for input from the public, in both after census data comes out and before maps are proposed, and then as well after different iterations of maps are proposed. And this is also an opportunity to ensure compliance with the Voting Rights Act and avoid litigation by having a formal process for organizations that represent VRA-protected groups to have a say in the process. And I think that is it. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you. We'll go back to Janet Brown now that we have the correct phone number.
This is Janet.
Yes, Ms. Brown, this is Mary Kaiser with the City of Fort Worth, and you're on the line with the Redistricting Task Force, and you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Okay. Am I after this guy?
No, you're on right now. Your video is 30 seconds delayed.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. My name is Janet Brown. I live in District 9. I am a small business owner and a volunteer deputy voter registrar. I am very concerned about this process. I would like to see independent redistricting committee. I do not want to see you protecting the incumbent council members. They need to represent the people. You need to represent the people as well. Please do not repeat the error from the past, requesting citizen input and then more or less discarding it. I was very interested to hear the information that was presented. I didn't catch his name. I think it was McElroy. In regard to the potential voters, it looks like less than 60% of potential voters are actually registered in Tarrant County, which is a pretty disgraceful number. Austin has over 90% voter registration rate. And then, well, not Austin, but Travis County. And then rarely do we get 65% of voters to the polls. And I think that this is a function of the gerrymandering and the redistricting. People say all the time, why bother? My vote doesn't count. We need you to reduce the amount of voter suppression and encourage people to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker will be Stephanie Swanson. Stephanie Swanson, and you do have a handout from Ms. Swanson in your materials.
Hello?
Is this Stephanie Swanson?
Yeah.
Yes, this is Mary from the City of Fort Worth. You're on the line with the Redistricting Task Force.
Hi.
And you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Okay, okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Stephanie Swanson. I'm speaking today as a member of the League of Women Voters of Texas and also on their behalf. I wanted to put forth our position really quick before I forget that. Our position is that we support an independent redistricting wholeheartedly. This is at the national level, state level, and also at many local levels as well. I understand, though, that City Council has given you the task of determining the criteria and the process to use. And so if you would turn to page 3 of the package that I've given you guys, I put forth a list of recommendations specifically for this situation. So I've listed the criteria, suggested timeline, and also ways to improve transparency and the procedures that City Council will use to draw the maps. And so I wanted to point out quickly that for the criteria, I've listed these in ranked order. Number 1 and number 2, population equality and compliance with the Voting Rights Act. Those are, you can't really get around those. Those you have to have those at the top and be in compliance with those because it's federal law. The next is geographic integrity for the criteria, and there are several ones that I've listed out. I should have mentioned at the beginning that this list of recommendations has come from a coalition of voting rights groups at the national level, and it was prepared by voting rights attorneys. It was actually adopted from legislation for an independent redistricting commission as well. So these voting rights groups pulled out, or they put together and drafted what they thought would be appropriate for an independent redistricting commission. And so at any rate, if you go down, I also heard a lot of talk about maps being drawn behind closed doors during the last round of redistricting. We have put in a lot of recommendations for how to prevent that from happening this go round. Besides holding public input hearings in the city, what you would like to see happen is actually maps being drawn in open meetings in front of the public so people can actually see as the lines are being drawn. Let me see what else really quick. Another thing is communications of the council members. It would be nice to know if they do communicate with anyone outside of City Council regarding the maps, that becomes public knowledge. And again, all of this is to make sure that this closed door process is brought to light, basically. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but these are the list of recommendations that the League would like to put forth for your consideration. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Jill Freer. Hello?
Hello, this is Jill Freer.
Yes, Ms. Freer, this is Mary Kaiser. You're on the line with the Redistricting Task Force, and you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you, Madam Chair and Task Force. I know you have a big job in front of you. I live in Fort Worth on 2916 Merrimack Street. I urge you to recommend to the City Council the creation of an independent redistricting commission to draw the new district maps in 2020. Our citizens can only be represented well when the maps are drawn fairly and independently of political bias. Citizens need to know that they matter to the city and that their vote counts and that they have fair representation. It is also important that this task force set fair parameters and guidelines, which I think you're calling criteria, for the Independent Redistricting Commission, and I realize that is your main charter. We know that the current maps don't work. Why do I say that? Because currently about 40% of Fort Worth is Hispanic or Latinx, and there is only one Latinx council member currently. We need a sharp change that removes the City Council from the map drawing process. Gerrymandering has no place in the city, especially in our nonpartisan races. When citizens are asked to get involved in redrawing the district boundaries, but the council has the final say, they know that their input doesn't really matter. As Ruth Bader Ginsburg stated in a 2015 Supreme Court case on the constitutionality of independent redistricting commissions, the elected officials should remember their dependence on the people, and that the core principle of Republican government is that the voters should choose their representatives, not the other way around. Statistics show that states, cities, and other entities that use independent redistricting commissions have representation that reflects the diversity of their population. There needs to be a realistic time frame for the Independent Redistricting Commission to do the important work of defining the criteria and engaging with the city on drawing new district maps. And I urge you to help the city set realistic schedules for this important work. In summary, I request that you recommend to the City Council that number one, we set up an independent redistricting commission. Number two, ensure that there are fair parameters and guidelines for the commission of this work. And number three, set realistic schedules for completing this important work. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and I encourage you to continue on with your important work here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that's our last speaker.
Well, thank you to all of I think the beauty of this is that we're getting public input a lot and early, which is, I think, very helpful.